Morning, everybody. Well, here we are, gathered to celebrate together the Feast of the Epiphany. And it's one of the great feasts of the Christian year. Epiphany actually falls tomorrow, on January 6th. It's traditionally the day that the Christmas decorations are brought down. Some celebrate it as Twelfth Night. In the Eastern tradition, it is accompanied by a great blessing of the waters. Just as Chris quite energetically reminded us of our baptismal vows with the Aspergillum at the Christmas service, many Orthodox Christians also take the opportunity to remind themselves of their baptismal vows by cutting holes into icy lakes and rivers and jumping into the freezing waters beneath. I think we might have got off lightly. Today's Gospel tells us a well-loved and well-remembered story. A story which has inspired the Christian imagination for a long time. Wise men have seen a new star rising in the sky, and they have interpreted its meaning. A new king has been born, a king of the Jews. And so they make a long journey bringing this news. And they go to what might be the logical place. They go to a holy city, a city which is still right now and has always been central to the Jewish faith. They go to Jerusalem. As they spread their news, as the news begins to spread amongst the people, it reaches Herod, the king of Judea. And he takes the news seriously, but not with any kind of gladness. After all, he claims to be a king himself, and these foreigners claim that he's been replaced, or maybe was never legitimately the king at all. Turning to the religious leaders of Jerusalem, Herod asks where the Messiah is to be born, and they, referring largely to the words of the prophet Micah, point the way to Bethlehem. So who were these wise men? The Greek word is magos, and we translate it into English as magi. We're not sure exactly who St. Matthew refers to with this title. We're told that they come from the east, and it's most likely that the Magi, the wise men, were priests from the Zoroastrian tradition, perhaps from Persia or the Arabian Peninsula, somewhere like Oman or Yemen in modern terms. Zoroastrianism is one of the world's oldest faiths. It's about 3,500 years old, so it's actually about the same age as Judaism. It really goes back a long way. Today, most Zoroastrians are located in India and in Iran. There are more than 200,000 in total. There's a Zoroastrian community right here with us in Perth. At the time of the Gospel, Zoroastrian priests were well known for the attention that they paid to the heavens, for their astrology. Their practice of observing the night sky was part of their religious duties. And diligently following the practices of their faith, they see a sign from God, a new star. I think there's something there that it's worth pausing for a moment to consider. We're told that the religious leaders in Jerusalem knew quite a bit. They knew that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, and yet they're unaware that the Messiah has actually been born until a message comes to them, travelling with adherents of a foreign faith. The news of a Messiah is disruptive. It upsets the status quo. It's a threat to the existing centre of power. And I think we see this in Herod's reaction. He seeks to gather more information. He sends the wise men on, asking them to return and share what they learn of this child. And so again, it's the outsiders who act. They've already made a lengthy journey from the east. And having been pointed in the direction of Bethlehem, on they go, hastening, led onward by a star, to the very house where the Holy Child was. And there takes place a scene which has often stirred the Christian imagination. The Magi bow before the child Jesus and offer him gifts, gold, frankincense and myrrh. Most importantly, I think, they see the child's significance. They kneel down before him and they offer homage. You can see up on the projector an image I took, which I took from a film by Pier Paolo Pasolini, an Italian film director, called The Gospel According to St. Matthew, possibly not the most imaginative film title. It depicts this event, these strange foreigners entering into a dusty town and bowing down before a child born to a poor family, a child with no apparent significance. It's surprising and I think challenging. Lines are being crossed. Rich and learned priests bowing to a poor child. Foreigners entering into a Jewish community. Lavish gifts fit for a king given to a child who not long ago had no other place to rest his head than in a cattle trough. Through Advent and Christmas, we've talked about incarnational theology, the presence of Christ with us in the here and now, the presence of God in the world, which we can observe if we have ears to hear and eyes to see. I think that perhaps today's gospel reminds us of a truth, which disturbs our complacency. God is not constrained by human groupings. God is not constrained by the ways in which we human beings all too easily divide ourselves up and isolate ourselves from each other. As Anglicans, perhaps it's easiest to look for the presence of God, the presence of Christ in the world, through the incarnation, and for glimpses of the coming kingdom of God in our own Anglican community. Maybe easiest of all, when we look around in this place, in St. Augustine's, and look for the incarnation. And I think we can see that. We can see the incarnation, we can see the presence of God in our community here today. And perhaps we can see it in communities like our own, around Perth and around the world, meeting in a similar way to offer worship. Perhaps we might go further. Perhaps we might be comfortable to say that God is active in all other Christian communities. But perhaps, I think, today's gospel calls on us to look a little bit wider. We are reminded that God desires to live in community with all human beings. In the coming kingdom of God, there won't be any division. Instead, there will be peace. Humanity in its wholeness brought into complete relationship with its Creator and with one another. I think we've all watched with horror over the past couple of weeks, and especially the last week, the events happening over East. The bushfires and the evacuations, the people waiting for rescue on beaches or floating in boats. Tragically, more than 24 people have died. Over 2,500 houses have been destroyed. It's estimated that 500 million animals have been killed. And yet, in that terrible adversity, we've seen communities come together. We've seen people brought together by their faith, taking action to assist. Christians of all denominations, but also Sikhs, Muslims, the Jewish community. We've seen people of all faiths and none come together in charity, answering the needs of the victims. People of all faiths and none bravely fighting these fires and supporting those who do. I sometimes struggle with all of these horrible events going on around us to feel positive about the future. We know that our world is changing, and science tells us that humanity is the reason. Science also tells us of possible ways to address the issues that face us. It's clear that we must change our behaviour so that future generations may live in a world which can support them and all of God's creatures. These fires are unprecedented. They're frightening. They make me afraid of the events which might occur in the next decade and the decades soon to come. And yet, perhaps in the coming together of people, in their response to these horrific events, we get a glimpse of a hopeful future, a reminder that the possibility that things may still change. And we are reminded by today's gospel that God is active in the world, that God seeks to bring us together so that all of us may be brought fully into relationship with our Creator. The Lord be with you.